It doesn't matter how much you love your bike, it can be better for you, and I can help you get it there. But first you need to understand some special things that most of us don't. Especially if you ride a bike with a single-sided swing arm. It doesn't matter the brand. You're really in for a treat right now, because I've got answers to questions that most of us don't even realize that we should be asking. So sit back, relax, and focus. I'm Gogo for Superduke.com, and I'm making good on my promise. Here's part 2 of the new world of Superduke setup. The 12 and 1390 Superdukes are kind of slow to steer. They take the wide way around turns. And when you try to accelerate out of a turn, they squat, they go wide, you gotta back off. It's kind of a headache. I design and sell parts that solve these problems, which quite a lot of you use by now, and I sincerely appreciate your trust. But I wanna do more. I wanna share more. Because the better I understand the science behind all this, the better racer I become. And I want to help you be better too. I want you to be better, I want you to be safer, I want you to be faster. But don't get this twisted. Just because I learned all these things on the racetrack doesn't mean they don't apply to you on a twisty road or even going to the laundromat. They do. Let's start with swing arm angle and something called anti-squat, which I talk about often, but trust me, this is some new stuff right now. So the more you have, the more the bike pushes the tire into the ground when you accelerate. The less you have, the more the bike squats when you accelerate. And you know, I talk about this often, bad things happen when the bike squats and you accelerate, you can't finish turn, all this stuff, right? So anti-squat is good. It's our best friend. Squat, really, the operative word here is squat. So you twist the throttle, the bike goes down. You know, your weight gets pushed back, the bike goes down like this. Not our friend, right? So the opposite of squat is anti-squat. These two things are measured on a percentage scale, right? So when you accelerate and the bike squats down, that's less than 100. 98, 97, 96, right? So numbers that are below 100% is squatting. Numbers that are above 100% is anti-squatting, okay? So sometimes, most times actually, people will refer to your anti-squat number as like just a double digit. Instead of saying 115, they'll just say 15. People that I talk to anyway. But they're the same thing, 115% or 15, kind of slangish. So you wanna be above 100, unless you're gonna squat down like that. The thing about a Superduke is it comes with just 7, so 107%. Now, that's not that much, right? In my opinion, it's not nearly enough. I often speak about, you know, the swing arm's kind of flat. It needs more swing arm angle. If I was leading the parade here, I was going in the right direction, but I took the wrong street, okay? It's not really that the swing arm is flat, it's that the bike would do better if the swing arm had more angle, right? It's complicated, and I'm gonna get into it in a minute, and it's gonna be easy to understand. But for now, let's just say this bike behind me, and really most bikes, when you really want to get into the throttle, they don't really have enough anti-squat. But how much anti-squat do we really need? And is swing arm angle really the only way we can get it? I used to think it was, but guess what? I was wrong. And I'm going to tell you why next. There are 3 basic ways to change the angle of your swing arm. We have shock length, right? You can make the shock longer or shorter, which changes the angle of your swing arm. You can change your axle position inside the eccentric hub of a single-sided swing arm. That changes the height and angles of your swing arm. And a suspension linkage. Those are the 3 basic ways. Some bikes, more exotic bikes, have the ability to change the position of the pivot point of the swing arm. That's really trick. Oh, I wish we had that. But most bikes, like the Superduke behind me, don't have that. So we're stuck with these 3 basic ways. All 3 of these ways to affect your swing arm angle also affect your rear ride height, which in turn also affects the front of the bike, right? Your rake and trail. So it's like, oh my God, you change one thing and 6 and 12 other things change. That's motorcycle setup. That's also life, by the way, but let's stick to motorcycles for now. So this is where I get to share with you a really cool note that I did some research to confirm, and I got a positive confirmation that no matter how you change your rear ride height, right? Whether it's with a longer shock or a linkage or axle position, the relationship that these changes in rear ride height have on your trail is the same, okay? So how do you know what that is? So this is a cool point right here. As you know, all single-sided swing-arm motorcycles, be it KTM or Ducati or whatever, they all come with ride height tools, right? Because this is so important to understand where the ride height is. No, none of them come with ride height tools, which is like, I don't get it, right? When I raced Ducatis for all these years, I bought a Fast by Faraci ride height tool. It was just like, well, it looked kind of like this, right? So when I started racing this bike, obviously I have to have a ride height tool, because how am I gonna know where I was, right? If I changed gearing and I had the bike set up to a good place, right? And I changed gearing and now all of a sudden the bike's like this, I ride the bike, it feels terrible. So if I had adjustable shock, I turn the shock until I get back to where I was. I never knew where I was. So I made this tool and I put it right on the frame here, and all my measurements and all my data, I've shared stuff in the past, sheets and data and ride heights and all this stuff, but there's only one of these in the world, and it's really hard to ship, and it's heavy, and it's ridiculous, right? So now I have these. And the cool part about this ride height tool is it's foldable, and it fits in your toolbox, like in a drawer. How cool is that? And the numbers on this ride height tool are exactly the numbers on this ride height tool. So all of my racing data, which is also your street data, that's all based on this. It's also based on this, right? So you put this in here and you just measure. I mean, you have to have the bike on jack stands so the rear suspension is hanging down, and I made it so you measure right from the top of the axle opening, right? And I just put the tape measure there and go up, and there you go. There's my ride height. And I can take my ride height and your ride height, put it into my system, and I know what my trail is. Boom. So I know if I want to change my offset, right? Because now we have a Superclamp with adjustable offsets. I know which one to pick based off of my ride height. Right? So this is a tool, a very powerful tool to use to get your bike to suit you better and to keep it suiting you better. Because what happens if you change your gearing 2 teeth shorter or longer, or you go from a 16 to a 17 or a 17 to a 16? You want to snug the chain up, now your bike just changed again. So you get it right back to where it was. It's beautiful. Okay, so rear ride height and trail directly related, that's wonderful. That's a comforting thing. Life is not that confusing. But it's going to get worse in a second. What about rotating the axle inside of this eccentric hub? It's very inconsistent. Not as it relates to trail. Let's forget about trail for a second. And let's think about the relationship between your axle position and the swing arm angle. Right? Because remember, that's what we're going for. We're trying to find more anti-squat. Bike comes with very little, we want to get some more. So unfortunately, there's very inconsistent things that happen when you rotate the axle. Okay, so I have found it really helps me at least to visualize how this axle moves inside of this hub like it's the face of a clock, okay? So that's 12, 6, 3, 9, okay? And the axle moves like this. It moves in a circular shape, but it doesn't complete the whole circle. It only does the upper part of the circle, and actually not even, it's kind of skewed a little bit towards later in the afternoon, if you want to think about it that way. So it goes from about 10:40 in the morning to 2:10 in the afternoon. That's the rotation that we have that's available. That's where this axle travels to. Okay, so let's get close and comfortable here because this is important. And it's a bit of a pain in the ass. The reason that I said rotating the axle and its effects on swing arm angle is inconsistent is because it's inconsistent. Pardon me if I'm gonna refer to my notes a little bit. If you think about the clock, like we just talked about, I charted this out and I looked at different gearing combinations and the numbers behind them in positions that we can relate to with this clock, right? So if you take this axle and you rotate it from 11:30 in the morning to 12:30. So if this is 12, you're going from here to here, okay? Check this out. You change the swing arm length, right? So that attributes to your wheelbase, 10 millimeters. You changed the length 10 millimeters, but you only changed the height 1 millimeter. So the difference, right, in swing arm angle that you made is negative 11.5 degrees to negative 11.3. So what does that mean? That means 1.8% of a change that you made to the swing arm angle. Now, you know, when we're getting close in motorcycle setup, 1%, 2%, they can sometimes be a lot, okay? So you're probably gonna feel that. Now, if we go from 12:30, remember I said that the circle is kind of biased towards the afternoon. So we're doing 1 hour increments starting 11:30, 12:30, right? So the next one is 12:30 to 1:30. Now, that change, the first one was 10 millimeters of length. The second one is only 7 millimeters of length. But the first move was 1 millimeter of height. This move, 12:30 to 1:30, is 4 millimeters of height, right? So that's a bigger difference, right? So, ready for this? Swing arm angle. Now we go from negative 11.3 to negative 11.4, which is not even 1% of a change. It's like 0.88% of a change, right? So we just did the same 1 hour rotation difference and see how different the results we got so far. Now, there isn't 1:30 to 2:30 because it doesn't go all the way to 2:30. I had to start at 11:30 because of data reasons. So I'm picking 1:10 to 2:10, and 2:10 is the farthest back it goes. You ready for this? So 1:10 to 2:10, the distance in length to our swing arm, to our wheelbase, is 0.5 of a millimeter. 1 hour, 1 hour, 1 hour. 0.5 of a millimeter in length is the only thing that we changed. Height is 7.5 millimeters. So the first hour of change is 10 millimeters of length and only 1 millimeter of height. And the last hour of change is 0.5 millimeters of length and 7.5 millimeters of height. And now if you look at the percentage of the angle of the swing arm that we changed, again, it's 1.8%. So it goes 1.8%, 0.88%, and then 1.8%. Inconsistent changes to the angle of the swing arm. And if you look at percentage-wise and how much of an impact it makes, like to the feel and how the bike works, not the most impactful. It's the least impactful of the three options that we have available to us to change the swing arm and the anti-squat. And let's get into those next. Let's start with shock length. if you have an RR, or you bought a shock that's height adjustable, length adjustable, you have a very powerful tool at your fingertips. Lucky you, good job. If you have just the OEM standard version that's not height adjustable, don't sweat it. You're not like out in the uncola, because the least costly upgrade you can make for your bike that has the most impactful change are Sport Links. They're under 200 bucks, and they'll do exactly the same thing as your shock length, plus they do something that the shock length doesn't do. So don't worry, there's a solution for you too in these Sport Links. But getting back to shocks, to length adjustable shocks, there are several on the market that fit Super Dukes, right? There's the WP Apex Pro that comes with the RR. And let's just talk about that one for a minute, because it's a little bit different. The OEM shock length is 356 millimeters. And remember, we want to make it longer, right? So we can increase swing arm angle and get better drives and all this wonderful stuff. Less trail, all these things. The WP Apex Pro comes 358 millimeters. So it's only 2 millimeters longer, but it's adjustable. But it's only 7 millimeters of adjustment. So it goes from 358 to 365. It doesn't go any more than 365. Now, there are other aftermarket shocks, right? Just off the top of my head, there's the Maxton, there's the Mupo that I have in the bike right now, and there's the Ohlins TTX that I use, right? And there's also this company, Andriani, that makes kind of like a Frankenstein Ohlins TTX shock, and they build it to different lengths. I've talked to different people and they have different lengths, and it's really confusing to me. So let's just leave that one on the side for a second. The Mupo, the Maxton, and the Ohlins that I use are 360 millimeters to 370 millimeters. They're 10 millimeters adjustable, and they start at 360 to 370. So they offer a lot more capability to impact your trail way more, to get more swing arm angle. They're pretty powerful, but there's a problem, right? The control arm on the OEM bike cannot take a shock that's longer than 365 millimeters, because the shock hits the control arm. You can't do it. If you buy the shock and put it in and try to extend it, it hits, right? When the swing arm extends, it hits. So that's why I make the Super Link, right? And it's got that S shape. So now those shocks can be extended to 370 and they don't hit anything. And even with stock exhaust, whatever, everything, the S shape is very carefully designed to go over everything and still be super strong. It withholds like 8,000 pounds of force, way stronger than it needs to be, all tested and all cool. So very basically, you use all these different ride height adjustable shocks, and you change your ride height, which changes your trail and changes your swing arm angle. And how do you know how much you change them? With the ride height tool. All good. We're done, right? We're not done. So let's go back to OEM shocks for just a second, right? So if you have a shock that's not height adjustable, what do? Don't worry, I got you covered. I sell a Sport Link that's plus 10, plus 15, and plus 20 millimeters. Now, what does that mean, Rick, relative to what? If you had an RR and you had an Apex Pro shock and you wound that thing as tall as I could go, as far as you could go, you're extending it, well, let's see, 356 millimeters is the OEM shock. And then the Apex Pro is, it can go to 365. So that's 9 millimeters higher longer than the OEM shock. And remember, when the shock moves 1 millimeter, the rear ride height increases 2 millimeters. The ratio is 2 to 1 or 1 to 2, however you want to look at it. So if the Apex Pro is 9 millimeters or can be 9 millimeters longer than the OEM shock, the rear of the bike can be 18 millimeters higher than stock. Well, guess what? I sell a plus 10, a plus 15, and a plus 20. So you could have an OEM shock and get even more than the Apex Pro will give you. And why is that great? Because let me just tell you this really quick. I talked about originally that this bike has a lot of trail. It's kind of slow steering and lazy and a very wide turning circle. It's not very knife edge like, right? I race this bike now with 99 millimeters of trail, and I really love it a lot. This bike comes with 107.7 millimeters of trail. So a plus 20. If you add 20 millimeters to the rear right of this bike, you're actually, because the bike's angling like this, your forks are getting steeper. I think even with 20 millimeters more height, you're still only at like 103 millimeters of trail, which is still a lot more trail than I have that I race with. I used to race at 101 and I thought that was like the best thing in the world until I started to go below. And now I live there. So I also learned something very recently. It was a track day on Sunday, and I was at the track, and a friend of mine had an RC8C, right? The Kramer, but the orange, the KTM version, which I think is way better looking. He let me ride it. And I was so excited because I can't afford that bike. I'd love to race it, but I can't afford it. So he let me ride it. And he had made some adjustments to the foot pegs because his toes were dragging. They were really close to the seat, and I'm a tall guy, so right away I didn't really fit on the bike very well at all. But I will say this. I did a decent lap, a decent pace, probably like a rider pace. I wasn't going full bore at all, but I was going pretty good. And when I tipped it into the turns that I had just raced at the day before with this bike, it felt so similar. The front end felt so similar to my Super Duke with 99 millimeters of trail. I remember tipping it in and going, wow, it's like the same bike, which is a hell of a thing to say because a Kramer is purpose built for the track, right? And this bike is not purpose built for the track. And here I am going into turn 2 on this bike, or going into turn 2 on the Kramer, the RC8C, same feeling on the front. So when I got home, I called my buddy Gavin, and he looked up some data, and guess how much trail the RC8C has? 99 millimeters, just like my Super Duke. Thanks to the Superclamp and the Super Link and all this stuff that we did, but point is, you can get there, and it's a pretty cool place to be. So, short story over. Okay, I started this talk about anti-squat, right? Which is related to something called chain pull. The hell is that? So if you visualize the countershaft sprocket, I've talked about this before, but if you visualize the countershaft sprocket, when you accelerate, this baby spins hard, right? And it pulls the chain forward, depending on 3 points. This point right here, the center of this pivot point, this right here is the pivot point of the swing arm. So from this point to this point to this point, those 3 points will have a massive impact on when the chain pulls. Does it push the swing arm down? Does it push the tire into the ground, which kind of helps with traction and helps keep the nose planted and anti-squat, our friend, right? Or is this relationship so odd that when you accelerate, it pulls the axle up? It pulls this high, which basically, lowers you down onto the ground and reduces traction. It doesn't really drive the tire into the ground. It kind of pulls it up a little bit and you fall. All right, is that what happened? Or is it neutral? It doesn't do anything. So the relationship of those 3 things can be, so when you accelerate like this, nothing happens at all in the swing arm. It just drives forward. What happens? What does your bike do? What do you have? Remember, I believe, and the numbers kind of show, that the Super Duke comes with very little anti-squat, and we want more of it. So if you were paying attention, you notice I pointed to this point on the sprocket and this point on the sprocket. And of course, yeah, they're gonna change if we change the swing arm angle, but what if we just change sprockets? What if we don't change the swing arm angle so much? This is something that I wrestled with over the winter because it used to be that the only way that I could manipulate the chassis and get this bike handling really well, going where I wanted to go and driving out of turns so well, was with the rear ride height, the Super Link and a height adjustable shock just to the moon, right? But I didn't love the rear ride height so high. I didn't love it, messing with my head, my confidence, being so far from the ground, all this stuff. We've talked about it. So the Superclamp came, right? Designed it because I wanted to tone down the height and get my trail that way, which wonderful, worked out, beautiful. But when I lowered the height, I started freaking out because now am I gonna lose my anti-squat? Like I'm going to. If I lower the rear a little bit back to earth, my anti-squat numbers are going down, down, down. So I was kind of bumming about that. So my friend Angela and Gavin, we did a lot of work over the winter researching and data and stuff and mapped a bunch of stuff that I'm going to share with you now, which is pretty exciting. It turns out swing arm angle is not the only way that you can increase your anti-squat. Actually, without even moving the axle at all, you can impact your anti-squat more than rotating the axle as far as you can. All the way up, all the way down, forward, back. Just doing sprocket sizes, you can have more of an impact than the position of your axle, which is super exciting to me because that's exactly what I needed to get my anti-squat back where I had it, even when I lowered the rear ride height. It's also exciting because some people don't really like even middle height. Like some people, even a plus 20 sport link, they'll feel like it's too much. Maybe their legs are not that long or whatever the reason is. I'm even making a link right now for somebody that lowers the bike from OEM height. So everyone has different needs. What if someone doesn't want to raise the ride height at all? Well, if you change your sprockets wisely, right? Sometimes you can find exactly the same gear ratio, but with different size sprockets, front and rear and chain lengths, and get your axle to stay just where it was, but your anti-squat completely changes, which is fantastic. Now, I can illustrate, I'll give you one example of exactly this at work so to help you understand. So I found two gearing combinations that put the axle in almost identical place. They're very different from each other as far as the size of sprockets, but the axle position is in the same place. So the first one is 17, a 17 up front, a 40 in the rear, and a 112 link chain, like stock. That's what comes stock. The other one is a 16, smaller in the front, 44. Much larger in the rear, and the chain length is 114 links. And those two combinations, they're very different, but they put the axle in the same place. And now check this out. So if you made that change, first of all, your bike would accelerate much harder, but second of all, the ride height would be exactly the same. I think 1 millimeter different, basically exactly the same. The wheelbase, exactly the same. But the measurement of the 1740 is 11. So 111% anti-squat. Remember, OEM was 7, so 107%. Let's call it 7. This is going not twice, but quite a bit more to 11. But the other one is 14.7. That's almost 4% more just by changing sprockets. And think about this for a second. Our first example is 1740, so it's a large front sprocket and a smallish rear sprocket, but the OEM rear sprocket is 38. So the number on that is even less. That's why it only has 7 anti-squat, right? So it's that relationship, it's kind of a small rear sprocket and a big front sprocket. But if you reverse that, if you go small up there and big in here, you're really helping anti-squat a lot. And you don't necessarily have to be changing your ride height at all. Now, if you focus on that change we just made alone, just to gearing, not to ride height, the difference we just made in anti-squat is equal to the difference that we would make if we put a +20 Sport Link on. That's pretty huge. Now, we didn't affect the trail at all, but we did get a lot more anti-squat. Now, you might feel like I'm kind of geeking out a little bit here, and maybe I am, right? But this is really interesting to me because I'm trying to get a job done, right? That's about, well, it's really about joy, right? You get so much time on your motorcycle and you want to get the most joy out of it that you can. And riding a bike, that's like a little bit of a struggle versus riding a bike that just goes right where you want. One is a lot more joyful than the other. And we only get so much time riding, so why would you not pursue the route to the one that gives you the most joy? I would, so that's the job, get the most out of my experience. And these things, these lessons that we're learning, this tool, it's a tool, basically, on how to get more anti-squat with sprockets. If you had me on a job and you said, hey, here's a tool to get your job done quicker, more effective, more accurately, safer, I'd give you all the money in my pocket. Give it to me. I want to build right now with it. And this is just like that. So that's why it's exciting. And that's why I'm taking the time to share it with you. So there we go. We've got swing arm angle and how to get it 3 different ways, and which one is more impactful with anti-squat and which one is less. We've got ride height, and we learned the connection between rear ride height and trail, right? And now we have a way to measure the ride height. We can measure the ride height, where to go, with this tool that folds up and goes in the toolbox. How awesome is that? It's pretty awesome. And by the way, my Fast by Farachi ride height tool, these were steel, and you slid it into the frame and it was just scratched the hell out of the frame. I hated that. Whatever. So these are rubber, flexible rubber. This is like PLA Pro material or something. It takes 52 hours to make this tool, 52 hours. And I sell it for a very reasonable price. And the data, the tool part of it that you get, the way you can log where your bike is and get it to where you want to be and talk to me and I'll tell you where you are, that's priceless. None of the ride height tools that I have ever used came with anything like that. So pretty cool. I hope that you got something out of this because I've wanted to share this information with you for weeks and months. But it takes a little while, takes a lot of research, a lot of notes, and I delete this like 4 times before I get it done. So I'm not deleting this one. We're done.